Ah, the good old days. Back in the 1940s, 1950s, the war era, and just right after. If this country could just go back to that time, things would be so much better. This is a very common sentiment that gets expressed all over the internet these days. Well, what if I told you there are two different psychological operations going on at the same time that, if you really thought about it, would make you wonder why you felt that way? Now, to be very clear, things were classier back then. Things were a lot more genteel back then. But are you ready for the mind bomb to explode? To those people, the idea of nostalgia was a form of mental illness. You see, they didn't look back to, say, the 1890s or the 1880s and go, gosh, I wish things could go back to the way they were back then. You see, at that time, in the 1940s and 50s, anyone who was caught in nostalgia, caught pining for the past, was locked up. It was a sign of mental illness. Now, here's the part two of this. It's going to blow your mind. I found these old pictures and made sure that they weren't from some Hollywood movie, that these are just private pictures. People look at stuff like this and they go, man, romance was so awesome back then. It was just so different. It was so much better. Well, what's the psychological operation here? This is clearly the 1940s and 50s. Do you know how absolutely rare it was to have a camera? How few people could even afford to have such a luxury? Forget the film for it. Now, here's the next level. So you have the film for it. You have the camera. You've spent the money. You have the wherewithal. And you're out taking pictures. What are you going to take pictures of? This is, of course, from the movies. But why would you take pictures of this? If you were going to use this as some type of a visual documenting device, why would you take pictures of this? Not sunsets or trees or anything like that. You see, to us, the idea of having a camera and going out and taking pictures and video of just about anything, or breakfast, or, some puppy or kitten, something like that, no big deal. But to these people, this was a financial investment. It was an incredibly expensive item to have, an incredibly luxurious item to have. And it was not cheap to buy the film, and it was even more expensive to go have it developed. That these pictures still exist, and this is what they took pictures of, it shows something. It shows something that a lot of people probably wouldn't want to admit. And we talk about this in a bit more detail over at the Patreon channel, because there's some propaganda going on around the country right now that just isn't true about the past and what's going on now. Now, for those of you who have been over to the Patreon channel, yes, I know. I'm going to hell for the images that I'm showing over there and the type of content that we put up. When I die, I'm going to land at this little bridge, and I'm going to walk into this dark, glowing tunnel, and I'm going to go down the little road to the little place I have set aside for the rest of eternity that I'm spending in hell. It has to do with this part of the brain called the fornix. It's a part of the brain associated with recall memory, not recognition memory. The idea of remembering how things were and the emotions attached to it. Now, here's the right turn. What if I told you, back then, the idea of a man and a woman getting together and them finding out that a baby was on the way, and the man being criminally liable for child support, but if she were to enter into a relationship with another woman with his kid, the woman wouldn't be. They would have found this unbelievably unacceptable in our society. Imagine going back to an era like this and saying, gosh, you're so lucky to live in that era. We live in a hypersexualized culture where no babies are being born. Wait, what did you say? Right now, this country is in a state of population collapse. We are in a state of population collapse at a time when people are complaining about the hypersexualization of everything. See, the reason I showed this picture is, what if I told you things were way more sexualized back then? They just didn't have the technology to record it like we do. See, they didn't have the internet. They didn't have all the movie theaters. They had movie theaters, but not like we do. They didn't have the things to go do to pass the time. See, in every one of these pictures, there is a third person there holding this giant box, snapping this picture. And that's not something that is affordable at this time. Most people were very, very poor. Most people did not have cameras. So that we have as many pictures of couples mugging it up as we do is an insight. That's what they decided they wanted to spend the money on, developing the film, developing the photos. It's a trick of the mind. It's just one of those tricks that I don't think people really grasp about how we call them baby boomers. Baby boom. Baby boomers. That's what boomers comes from. Baby boom. But what does that mean about what was going on back then? What was the first order of business when the guys came back from war? Was it to build businesses? Was it to, well, I think folks can figure it out for themselves. We go farther into this at the Patreon channel. It's only $1 a month. Even less if you sign up for an entire year. Fully refundable first 90 days, no questions asked. We can partner with Vimeo, take the gloves off, so to speak, and show different types of imagery, tastefully, of course, to kind of hammer the point home. We should be able to do it here, but we can't. We just can't. It's just the reality. YouTube has the reach. Vimeo and Patreon has the truth. And right now, it's just the reality that we have to live in and accept. So I'll leave that part of the video there, and would really love to have you guys over there. It would make a huge difference in my life, more so than what you would even know. Because something else is coming. I truly believe now, looking back, COVID was just a test run. It was just something that was thrown out to see how the U.S. would react, and to get all of the data points as to who would fall in line, who wouldn't fall in line, who would get vaccinated, who wouldn't get vaccinated, who would use the internet for propaganda, who would take truth and twist it with lies, who would do all this stuff. Because there's something personal going on in my life right now. I'm going to go ahead and share it with you. There are programs out there right now looking for people who have been vaccinated against smallpox. Now, they haven't done this en masse for a very long time. In fact, you used to get a smallpox vaccine on your first birthday. Mine was, if I'm not mistaken, the last year when I turned 1, way back in the early 1970s. That was the last year, at least in the state that I was in, that they did it. So anyone younger than me wouldn't have had it unless they were in the military and got some type of a booster, some type of an issue with it. But here it is, BPL Plasma, Anti-Smallpox Specialty Collection Program. Although the World Health Organization declared smallpox disease eradicated in 1980, the potential threat of the virus still exists somehow. The risk of death after contracting the disease was 30%, and those who survived were often left with significant scarring and even blindness. Our program helps ensure a treatment is available as part of the U.S. government's strategic national stockpile. If this threat is realized, we are looking for donors previously vaccinated for smallpox. Read yours truly here. To join this program, which I have, plasma from participating donors is used to produce an immune globulin needed to treat people who experience an adverse reaction to the vaccine. So, what I'm doing is donating plasma so that they can create an immune globulin to treat people who they're going to have to vaccinate against smallpox in the future. Now, this is Bravo Papa Lima Plasma.com, BPL Plasma.com. Specialty program. You can get there with this. Smallpox, not hard to find. Scientists confirm smallpox vaccine also teaches T cells to fight Mpox. So that could be something to worry about. This is the conundrum. You see, in this story, they talk about how there were only 2 stockpiles of the active live varicella virus left, and the U.S. had 1 stockpile and the Russians had the other. This was back in 2014. And they were talking about having to destroy them. Well, there was a rumor, it was just a rumor, that after the fall of the Soviet Union, that some of these samples were sold off for money. So, and there's others that say that destroying every last trace of variola because of bioterrorism fears, is not a good idea. So, whatever angle you want to take on it, I don't really necessarily have a personal opinion to give you. Because being able to go out and do what was done during COVID and the vaccination process then will not be able to be done during a smallpox outbreak. People will have an entirely different take on what life and death means. Because this is no joke. This will kill 30% of healthy people. And right now, Americans just aren't healthy. We're the most unhealthy population on the planet. So, just be advised. There might be times when I'm not able to make videos in the next coming months just because of having to do this. They introduce this into your system and then your body starts kicking into overdrive, producing the globulin or the plasma that has the key factors needed to create the globulin. So because I'm one of the folks, last few, that got this, there's a whole lot of other qualifications besides just having had this that you've got to go through, but that's what's going on with me right now. So, and just to be completely honest, it's more than just wanting to help my fellow man. It kind of goes along with this. It really does. This is kind of where we're at here. On YouTube, a lot of us are in this particular boat, and YouTube has decided to do different things and make different decisions. There are, certain YouTubers that, let's just put it this way, they haven't been on the planet very long. And they're making tens of millions of dollars on this platform. Just by virtue of not having been alive for very long. I can't even use the word. And they are making hand over fist tons of money, and that's what is happening to the platform. It's getting taken over by juveniles. And I do mean young juveniles. And that's where they're putting their focus and their advertising dollars. So capitalism being what it is. Go over to Patreon and check this video out. It's something I think you're definitely going to want to see. Because when you look at this culture we live in now, and people say, oh, it's oversexed, it's hypersexualized, it's terrible, think for 1 minute about what was going on in these pictures. And why. It wasn't a cheap or easy thing to take pictures in the 1940s. Not everybody had a camera. They were expensive, especially just coming out of the war. People were living off government assistance at this time. And I do mean government rationing, government stamps, all sorts of things for food. People did not have access to places like Walmarts and Publix. For you to go out and spend that kind of money on a camera, and then once you had the camera, You only had a certain amount of film. What were you going to take pictures of? What were you going to take pictures of? This would have been seen, if it wasn't such a big part of culture, as a bit of a waste. But this explains the baby boom. This perfectly explains it. See, they weren't pining for the 1880s here. They weren't pining for a time long lost. They were living in the moment. They were living in that moment, and they were trying to freeze a moment in time. The reason I include this picture? How many kids? How many kids? Should give you an insight as to what was really going on at that time. There wouldn't have been a baby boom if there hadn't have been a certain influence in culture. So, I will leave it there. That's why we talk about psychological operations and propaganda. Right now, this culture is less interested in the activity that creates babies than they were even in the 1940s. Kind of mind-blowing, given what everybody sees on the internet. But that just is the case. Because proportionally speaking, to the amount of photos that are available from that era and now, there's a lot more pictures of this than there should be, given the cost involved. So, we'll leave it there. God bless. Pray for each other. Pray for me. I'll pray for you. Lift each other up. Like, share, subscribe. God bless. We'll see you guys next time.